electricians, surveyors, HVAC guys, landscapers, right? The list goes on. This conversation is about creating a win-win, opportunity for both. And whenever I think of that, I don't see that in my world. I've worked with a lot of
Yeah.
contractors. They don't return my phone calls. They don't pick up their daggone phone if we had a conversation in person. I don't get the invoice on time. They show up and they're cussing like sailors. These are just to name a few of the problems that I've run into, my friend.
Just a few.
And Josh, you get to work with these guys day in and day out, not only as a person of experience, but also as a coach, as a consultant. These folks have really drawn to you and your podcast and your resources and your wisdom. And so, yeah, man, I would love for you to share with me, what are the headaches that you are experiencing from your end within the trades industry?
Yeah, man, what a great question. And you definitely hit on a bunch of points that people have to deal with or seem that they have to deal with when working with tradespeople. But, a lot of the things that I see and a lot of people that I'm fortunate enough to work with, it's very simple. And this is how I explain it to people. And this is one of the most important questions that I ask them. What experience are you creating for the client? And when I ask that question, everybody wants to tell me about what they do. And I said, I know what you do. I know what industry you're in. That's not the question I'm asking. And so again, I asked them, what experience are you creating for the client? And when I talk to clients and consumers, I ask them the same question. What was your experience like? What is your expectation of that experience? And to answer your question of, for me, what is one of the most frustrating things? That answer for me is simple. The low standard of what tradespeople have allowed themselves to fall to and continue to hold themselves to. It's a very, very low standard being a tradesperson. And that's very, very unfortunate.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a pretty bold statement, because a lot of, I would say, these tradesmen, like other employments, take great pride in what they do. And a lot of the conversations that I've been having in this format have been, how do we own our contribution? And so what you're saying is really the conversation that is most needed for tradespeople, because there is something that they've contributed to it, and that also consumers have obviously done, and that they probably may not have paid their bills or maybe responded to the message as well. But yeah,
right.
tell me more, man, about what do you mean by we kind of shot ourselves in the foot a little bit, is what I'm hearing you say.
We have, and that reason is one of the reasons that I'm on the mission that I'm on, and a large my mission or my main purpose is to create a new standard in the trades. And that's with the tradespeople, that's with the client, that's perception, that's expectation, that's everything across the board. That's my mission. All I have ever been is a tradesman. I've never worked in retail. I've never worked in hospitality. I've never done anything else since I was old enough to grab a tool. The only thing I've ever done was in the trades. So my mission is to raise that standard, because I don't like the fact that we have become the third choice of livelihood and careers. And I say the third choice because there's, military, college, and you can think of anything else you want that's always put in front. And everybody always says, well, if you don't want to go to school, you can just learn a skill. And I don't appreciate that backhanded compliment of why, that's the expectation of us. And then the flip side of that is that's what we've allowed.
Yeah.
As tradespeople, that's the expectation that we have allowed to be bestowed upon us.
Yeah. And honestly, Josh, with that, what's been tell us about, I've listened to your podcast. If you guys are looking for a podcast, that really goes after a lot of the answers. We're going to be just scratching the surface in this conversation.
Yeah.
So check out the Tradesman Experience podcast on iTunes, Spotify, it's everywhere. Josh, what has been your solution? What do you bring to the table that helps business owners, tradesmen specifically, change their experience, create the experience?
Create the experience. That's a great question, because when I ask the question about creating the experience, once we're able to polish that, then we have something to build backwards from.
Mm.
So we want to create the ultimate experience for the consumer. Now, what are all the steps we need to take to get there? All the way back to where we're starting. And where we're starting, whether it's the business owner, the service manager, and if you listen to the podcast, you know I can't stand the word manager. Whoever I'm working with, it becomes personal, and we start looking at them personally on how they behave, from their personality to 6 principles or fundamentals of behavior that I've created, that I built my businesses with. And we start applying them, and I start educating them, and we start building standard operating procedures or systems of implementation, and using those tools.
Yeah.
Because that's all we use are tools. And so, ultimately I just help them equip themselves with better tools in their toolbox. It's ultimately going to create that experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And what is that? You shared this in our conversations. Can you tell the audience what are those laws that you kind of outline, and let's break them down?
Yeah, I'd love to. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. And they're in order for a reason, and they're in order, not that one's more important than the other, but you have to be comfortable with one before you move to the next. And the first law is attitude. And I wish I could say that was so plain and simple, but it's really not, because a lot of people confuse attitude with personality. And those are two totally separate things. Personality is how we are hardwired. It's how we process information, whether you like a lot of detail or just the nuts and bolts of it, whether you're direct and kind of a driver and dominant, whether you're a people pleaser. Those are personality traits. Those are part of our hardwire. I'm talking about the software. I'm talking about the decisions that you make that reflect your behavior as a person. So you have to have the attitude. Is ego taking over? Ego is an attitude, not a personality. And so what is it that's driving your behavior? And we start looking at the attitude, and we kind of dial that in first. It's the first law.
Yeah.
Once we get through the first law and into the second law is teamwork. Because no person did anything of greatness by themselves, ever. So when you conquer attitude and you understand the ego isn't taking over, the second law is understand that you need people around you that believe what you believe. So if it's work, they have to understand the purpose and the mission of your business. And 2, complement your strengths and weaknesses. So being able to build a cohesive team of people that can work together, that all understand law 1, and then understand what the mission is.
Yeah. I mean, Josh, like the attitude part, we were chatting, and like I said, sometimes we've experienced tradespeople, they come in and they teach our kids new words. So we're like, oh, great, this is going to be, we have to have the conversation with the kids about something that they heard.
Yeah.
It's now awkward, right? Is that what you're talking about when you say attitude? Because my question is, like, how does that make me more money? Like, the guy, boys will be boys conversation is kind of one of the things that I've heard, not to say I agree with.
That's a great question. And I'll try to give you a short example. A friend of mine in a different state had an air conditioning system installed. And when he approached the installer to simply ask, how much longer they were going to be. Now, mind you, they had already went through the salesperson, agreed to the price and all the product and all of that. So I'm talking about, the actual installation of the product. when he asked the installer that question, the installer literally grunted at him. He didn't use words. So when I talk about attitude, it's like, how are you behaving around other people?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how approachable are you? You know, how much integrity do you have? How do you make them feel?
Mm.
And all that's going to be based on how you act and what your attitude is and what your attitude says about you.
Yeah.
So if you just hate people and you're just going to grunt and growl at them when they ask you questions, you have a major attitude problem.
Yeah, that's great. That's really good.
I hope that gives you
Yes,
a good answer to that question.
it's a practical answer, which is exactly how we raise the standard. We approach the
Mhm.
conversation differently in the way that we show up and the way that we interact with it. So that, I mean, the
Yeah,
attitude, and
right.
that's adjustable. It's very adjustable because it's all choice.
It is choice, and you know, people choose to allow things to bother them. You
Mm-hmm.
know, they choose to respond a certain way. They choose to let their emotions, you know, respond a certain way. You
Mm-hmm.
know, that's all behavior.
Right.
And the more you understand that, the better control you have over your attitude, the the better experience you're going to create, the better leader you're going to be, the more you're going to be able to sell, the more trust you're going to build with the consumer,
There it is.
which is huge.
Yeah.
And and the more people are going to want to be a part of you in your company.
Mm. Which is the retention that nobody knows how to do well, or
That's right.
very few people.
Very, very few.
Yeah.
And you know, this conversation isn't about the few unicorns out
Mhm.
there. It's about the majority of us that have been held to this standard and this stigma. Those are the people that I want to work with, and those are the people that I am.
Mm.
And you know, these 6 laws that we're going through, me helping them understand that and getting them to apply it to where ultimately they are able to better serve their family and themselves, whether it's financially, whether it's behavior, you know, regardless of what it is, just want them to become better persons so their life is a better experience and they enjoy what they do.
Yeah.
No one should ever be embarrassed about being a tradesperson. That frustrates me. And that's why at the end of every one of my podcasts, I tell people, be proud to be a tradesman,
Mhm.
because we are the men and women that build this country. And I believe that to my core. And that is my part of my mission of why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it, man. What's number 3?
Number 3 is time ownership. And the easiest way for me to explain this is the billionaire and the beggar both have 24 hours in a day.
Yep.
You just decide what you're going to do with it.
Hmm.
And you know, when we start breaking down time ownership, and as I work with businesses, delegation always becomes the topic of conversation, because a lot of tradesmen, tradeswomen, when they have a business, chances are they can do everything in their business.
Yeah.
What they struggle with is delegating those responsibilities.
And why is that? Like, why are they so hesitant to pass these responsibilities on?
I think there's 2 things primarily. One, I think it has to do with the experience that they've had
Mhm.
coming up in the industry,
Mhm.
and they probably weren't trusted, or you know, they weren't delegated responsibilities, and if they were, the leadership was so poor that people never they were never praised for what they did right. They were always reprimanded for what they did wrong.
Mhm.
So I think they just kind of fall into this pattern of management instead of leadership. And 2, when you know, in any company, when you build a company and you build it from scratch, you want things a certain way.
Yeah.
And when you hand off those responsibilities, hoping that you're going to get the same result, it's very difficult. But when we go back to law 2, which is teamwork, you know, I have an entire process of hiring, interviewing, hiring, and onboarding. So delegation becomes simple.
Mm.
but it always comes up because, everybody's like, I don't have enough time in the day. I'm like, okay, all right, well, let's spend the day together and let's see where your time is going and where are your hours and minutes.
Yeah.
And, chances are, and I was lucky enough to have this conversation last night. He was telling me, he's like, oh, I spent 5 hours, putting in invoices and information. Well, my question is always simple. How much revenue can you generate in 5 hours doing the craft that you know how to do?
Right.
And in that 5 hours, can you not only pay someone that's much better skilled and equipped than you are to do that work, but become profitable at the same time?
Right.
So, delegation is a big deal. But having that time ownership, and understanding how important that is, and what you're doing, and whether or not you're reacting to business or proacting to business, all comes down to time ownership as well.
Yeah. And the thing is that with time ownership, it's not time management. We have to own it. If this is our
That's right.
responsibility, like that's one thing I
It's
love.
not. No, and I appreciate that observation, because that's why I named it that. If you're managing your time, then you're managing tasks and reacting to what everything is, either everyone is giving you,
Right.
or you're reacting to the situation, and then you're trying to manage your time.
Yep.
Time ownership is stepping back and having the ability to say yes or no, and understanding what that result is supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the thing I feel like with a lot of trades industries is Monday mornings are like the worst time to call an office of any trades office. I mean, just don't call Monday morning, because everybody's calling on Monday morning. And then,
Everybody. That's
and then
right.
everybody's calling in sick on Monday morning. And everybody's, canceling their appointments that they had lined up Monday morning. Like morning times are the worst. And to own the time, what could life look like if an owner were to own the morning with a freedom to say yes or no?
Yeah.
And make a lot more money.
They could, because you find yourself with more time. Because again, back to law 2 and law 1, when you have those principles in place, your responsibility is to make sure that everyone knows what the result is and lead them, which is giving them the flexibility, support, the resources and energy that they need to accomplish that goal or that result. But you're not doing it.
Right.
Right. You have people that you trust, that you love, and that you believe in, and that believe in you, and they're there to execute it. And the greatest compliment that you can give them is the ability to execute it.
Yeah. Give them that opportunity.
Yep.
And that trust, because that requires a level of trust with that person. And that goes back to the hiring stage of who is the person with the attitude that will help us champion. It's not necessarily just a skill, which is important and valid. What is this person's way of being? Which you and I have talked about in our coaching experience, right? Like you can learn a lot of skills. That's overall easy to do, frankly. Takes time, yes. Teaching patience, sure. However, your attitude is really a true statement of character, and that's work. That's really work.
It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of self-awareness, and self-awareness is one of the things that I kind of preach about a lot, either on the podcast or with my clients, because you can't hold someone to a higher expectation than you hold yourself.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work, because then you become a hypocrite, and then no one believes you anymore. So your responsibility as a leader and as a business owner is to drive the standard. And if you want people there every Monday morning, then you should be there every Monday morning.
Yeah.
And I was so fortunate to have one of the best teams I ever worked with when I owned my heating and air company. And rarely were people calling in on Monday. And if they were, I knew that there was a problem. And that happens. I mean, people are people, life happens,
right,
and all those kinds of things. But we had a 4% turnover rate.
Wow.
4%.
Wow.
And so people wanted to be there. They wanted to show up to work. They wanted to work together. So they did. They were there every Monday.
Wow. Unbelievable, man. And then
it's a trip.
I mean, honestly, man, I want to keep this going because this is getting building on what's, next one. We got attitude, we have teamwork, got time ownership. What's the next one, brother?
And then the fourth one stings a lot. It's accountability. And
everybody used to have the A word. Oh,
yeah, they're like, this is uncomfortable now.
Let's throw the next video on Facebook. That I want to look at right now.
Oh yeah, they're gonna tell. I'd rather someone lie to me.
Right.
No, it's accountability. And when you go through the first three, and in business, you're no longer accountable to yourself anymore. You're accountable to your team, and you're accountable to your client. And so you have to maintain that level of accountability all the time, because at the end of the day, it's up to you.
Yeah.
If you want the business to grow, it's up to you. If you want to create a better experience, it's up to you. If you want to serve your clients, it's up to you. If you want them to come back, it's up to you. Like no one else has anything to do with it. And the accountability one, this conversation always comes up. People want to talk about their competition. I will tell you, I don't care about your competition. I never cared about my competition, because all the time that I spend focusing on them is time I spend that I'm not spending focusing on me and what I need to be doing to better serve my team. And so when I quit worrying about what everybody else was doing, I stopped doing what everybody else was doing. Dude, because if you look at it was complete freedom. And if you look at the standard market value of whatever industry or trade that you're working with, there's so many cookie cutter recipes out there in the business world. They buy a truck, they buy a ladder, they buy a tool bag, they buy a set of gauges and a meter, and that's it. That's their business model. And when I saw what everybody else was doing, we literally went the other way, and I wasn't worried about them anymore. And not that we were better than them. That's not what I'm saying. There were companies we had some amazing competition, and I knew all the owners, and so there was no animosity or anger there.
Wait, you mean you can get along?
We were all playing the same
competition. Game. Yeah. Crazy. Whenever you are free, you're not all bitter towards the guy beside you. People take note. This is like life. Whenever you don't compare yourself to the neighbor that you don't really like, you can be their best friend.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't care what they drive.
Yeah.
I didn't worry about that. We were there to create a new standard market value. And that's what we did. And I knew the only way to do that was to take complete ownership and accountability of everything in my world. And that was my team. That was my processes. That was how much we paid. That was the benefit. Everything came down at the end of the day was, what decisions are we going to make tomorrow better? And having that complete accountability.
Yeah.
So that's law 4. And, as we go through these and people understand these, when you take one away, the whole system fails.
Yeah.
But the tip of the spear is attitude, because if you look at accountability, if you're having an accountability problem, you're going to need to go back to law 1 and check your ego and find out what's wrong with your attitude, and then start coming through the laws again and reattack accountability.
Yeah. Yeah. If anybody, I'm grabbing my book here as you're talking, man. If people are looking for a resource, Ego is the Enemy. It's a really good. It talks about what you're talking about, man. What is ego? What is it, and what it really what it really entails, that we don't like to have that conversation because it makes us squirm.
If I can add a couple references to the accountability, for me, Jocko Willink's book, Extreme Ownership, tremendous book about accountability. And then the book that completely changed my life in the aspect of accountability was QBQ by John G. Miller.
Mhm.
It stands for Question Behind the Question. It takes about 60 minutes to read. And that book changed my life. When I read that book, I literally called people the next day and apologized to them for how I used to behave. So,
Wow.
yeah, tremendous impact there.
That
So, great book and great reference. But accountability is going to be one of the most difficult.
yeah.
Like you said, one's not more important than the other, but it's probably the most difficult to maintain daily.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. How did you hold yourself accountable, man? Like what was like the way that you kept yourself in check? You know, you mentioned, you have your accountability to your clients, your
mhm.
team, your systems, like, but how did you really check in and be like, am I doing this?
Yeah, I tell you what, that's I love that question mostly because I love the answer. I had such a healthy, tremendous culture and team
Mhm.
that they held me accountable
Mm,
to a level where it was fun. And what I mean by fun is if one of the technicians went to a client's house that was my client, they would call and say, "Hey, Miss Smith is going to be my client after today." So there was this internal fun, high standard competition
yeah.
that we had amongst ourselves. So I knew that every time that I went out into the marketplace, I had to exceed that expectation, exceed that standard.
Mhm.
So that's how I held myself accountable, was by the standard that I expected from my team.
Mm, wow. And what a gift, like, for as the leader to hear it and
Mhm.
receive it, like to really actually hear it,
Oh
and not
yeah,
because it's easy to be threatened by it, and that goes back to our ego converse. That's the attitude. Like,
yeah,
that's why, folks. This
yeah.
all goes back to the attitude. Step one. This is the
Step
foundation.
one,
This is the
yeah.
foundation is not good. The house will fall. Like,
Yeah.
it,
Law one, you can hire and fire on attitude, and your business will change overnight.
mm, yep.
I mean, if you just applied law one, your business will change overnight.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where then you get to experience the freedom of resources that open up because people start using creativity, like humor, to
Yes.
build and instead of tear down. Like, I mean, let's be honest.
Mhm.
My experience with trades, both in my short stint in working in trades and also just looking at trades people, is a very crass humor that also tears down. And it's not, what I'm
Oh
saying, like,
yeah.
it's just, geez, oh, Pete, what's going on here? Um,
Yeah.
like, and here we can talk about humor and fun, and
Mhm.
that brings profitability and quality to, like, the worker who's doing who's getting paid hourly, and the
Mhm.
owner who's put a huge risk into a product, into a service, into a business. Like, that's great.
Yeah. That's right. And you use the word risk, and you can't talk about business owners or entrepreneurs without using the word risk.
Mhm.
The strategic plan is to mitigate risk. Well, you apply these principles, apply these laws, and build the company that you want to build. This is risk mitigation.
Yeah.
It's as simple or ignorant as that sounds. This is risk mitigation because they're not cussing you when they get in their truck and drive to the job site,
Mhm.
because you're not doing what you're asking them to do, or you're holding yourself to a lower standard than you're holding them.
Yeah.
When you are able to achieve that, you mitigate that risk. And like I said, it was a fun competition with us of who could do the best job at creating the experience for the client. And
Yeah.
you want to talk about an outstanding game to play. I mean, it changes everything.
Yeah. Yeah. We're having some comments coming. I'll just show them on the screen for everybody to see.
Yeah.
David says, "Dude, this is spot on." Bingo. Thanks, David. Really appreciate
Yeah.
it. Caitlin, no one talks about this. I feel like there's such a need for education in this area. so many talk about online digital businesses, but helping and educating the trades industry is lacking.
Mhm.
That's why
Yeah,
we're
and I would love to elaborate on Caitlin's comment in a little bit when we get
yeah,
through these laws, because it's an excellent point.
yeah. And I love how even Tim totally relate comparing my services and products to the competitors, my number one source of unwarranted anxiety. Real
Ain't
life,
that the truth?
real life, man, real life.
Yeah.
It sounds like the real world.
It
What
yeah,
would you
it
say?
is.
What would you like if Tim's in the room? What do you
Yeah.
talk to him? He's a business owner.
Great, very simple. Uh, Tim, the energy that you're wasting or spending on worrying about what your competition is doing, if you can turn that and then cultivate that into energy of growing and building yourself, that's going to create a better experience for the client.
Mhm.
That's going to improve the quality of the product, and it's going to improve the quality of your business. And it
Yeah.
doesn't matter what your competition is doing.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Having it's that attitude shift of like we know
Yes, it is.
we know what's going
Yeah.
on. It's anxiety. It's real. It's coming up. It just
Yeah, and you
shake it
can't
up.
be accountable for your
Mhm.
competition.
Mhm.
You can't change the market of your competition. You can't change the product of your competition. The only thing that you can do is be able to walk in to a room or sit in front of a client and be confident at the quality that you're bringing to the table, and get them to believe and trust in you that you are there to change the standard.
Mhm.
And this is why they want you. And when they buy you, they don't buy your product anymore. The product comes second. They've got to buy you, and they got to believe in you. And when you find people that believe what you believe, and you're able to show that and bring that to the market and add that value to people, it's incredible. It's a whole new experience.
Yeah. And Tim, he's a stud. You would love. He's created his own business and during a pandemic. So the, he's killing it, man. Like
Excellent.
literally, he literally he's a stud. He's a good man, and
Good.
I know he's really appreciative of what you're saying to him, man. Let's keep this conversation going, man, because we've been scratching the
Yeah.
surface. Next one, and this in the accountability conversation, man. So what's
Mhm.
pillar number 5? Law number 5.
Number 5 is going to be communication.
Mm.
And for years, I kept a postie on my desk, and it said, all problems are communication problems. Because understanding, and we can dive into communication deep,
Yeah.
because it triggers back to the hardware versus software I mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So from a leadership perspective, you have to understand your team, and you have to understand how they're hardwired. So you need to know what their personalities are. When you know what their personalities are, you're able to communicate to them more effectively, because you understand how they receive information. Uh, One of my service coordinators, love that woman to death. I mean, she was amazing.
Mm.
I knew that when I presented her with a task, I needed details. She was going to ask me questions, and I needed to be able to provide details.
Mm.
The funny part was I would never be able to give her enough details, because that's her personality. And I'm not a high detailed person. I prefer to,
You're the
carry a
homemaker.
sledgehammer. Yeah. And so, but the cool thing about that was, and the fun thing about that was, everybody on my team had to take a personality test. So we knew how to effectively communicate. So she knew that she was a high detailed person and I wasn't. So we compromised in our communication. And we would always laugh, because she could tell when I would start bleeding out of my ears. When she was telling me something, I'm like, I don't need to know this. Like, I, I'm losing oxygen here, right? But also she would remind me,
Yeah.
hey, I need more detail. And then as a leader and understanding how important that is, it reminded me that I needed to do a better job of communicating.
Shifted your
And
attitude.
so I needed to be equipped. Again, no ego, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So simple. Yeah.
Yeah.
Law 5, see law 1. No,
You're
it's
right. Go back.
and then and then the other part of communication is, you touched on it earlier. How well are you communicating with your consumer or your client? and I'm going to use the word client if you don't mind. I hate the word customer.
Yep.
In my opinion, cell phone companies have customers and Walmart has customers. I want clients. I want people that want me to take care of their friends and family. So I call them clients.
Yeah.
How are you communicating with your client? It's ridiculous that to be moderately successful in the trades, the only things you have to do is answer your phone, show up when you say you're going to show up, and do what you say you're going to do. I bet that puts you above over 60% of the competition just by doing those three things. So how well are you communicating with them in that regard? The second part of communication is that is your tool to create a first impression when you begin that experience.
What do you mean by that?
So, okay, when someone calls you, how are you answering the phone? Or how is someone on your team answering the phone? If someone calls me up and I'm like, hey, this is Josh, like, who wants to buy anything from me? Instead of like, oh, hey, thanks for calling the Tradesman Experience. This is Josh. How can I help you today? Just a little shift in communication creates a huge difference on the other end.
Yeah.
So creating that first impression is through communication. The second part to this, and the most important part of communication, is listening.
Wait, not talking.
Not talking.
Wait a second, Josh. I'm trying to make money here.
I know.
How's the consumer going to buy?
I know.
Whenever I don't tell
my logic
is
stupid, Joe. I'm telling you, it's dumb.
You should really consider coaching for yourself. Actually,
I need it. I'm telling you.
I can do it.
I need it.
Charge a lot of money. I'm kidding.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, send me your link.
Right.
No, one of the things I learned, and for anybody watching or listening that doesn't know, I spent 18 years in the heating and air conditioning industry. I've been a tradesman my entire life, but that was my specialty for a while. And the thing that I learned was when I would go work on an air conditioner or a furnace, my clients knew more about their system than I did. Now, they may not know how it operates or the mechanics of it, but they knew more about it. They knew what it sounded like. They knew how long it ran. They knew if it made a new whistle. They knew that system better than I did. So for me to effectively diagnose the problem, I had to listen to the client, which means I had to communicate effectively. And through that listening, I had to be able to ask good questions. And it's laughable of how many times the client would diagnose the system for me. And they were right.
Wow.
Like you said, they don't know the parts of it. They don't know the mechanics of it, but they would diagnose the system for me because they knew more about their system than I did. They had lived with it for 10, 15, 20 years. Of course, they know more about it.
Right.
But I had to be willing to listen to them so they could share with me what it is that they knew, how they felt, what they thought. And then I could apply my technical skills and create solutions.
Bring that clarity. And education, it sounds like, too. Like education was part of your process.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Because in the communication aspect, so many companies focus on the problem. They want to talk about the problem. They know they have a problem. They called you. If you're going to call me and pay me money to come to your house or your business, and you have a problem, and the only thing I want to talk about is your problem, I'm not doing anybody any good.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, I'm stealing your money. So being able to create solutions and develop solutions, and then how well do you communicate those solutions, which comes back to education. Because the other thing people forget, I think, and tradespeople forget, is we are the professionals. We were asked to come there to provide a service and or a product because we are considered to be the professional. If you're not the professional in the industry, you have one of two choices. You either step up your game or get out of the game. Like, you need to be the professional.
Yeah.
So when I would start communicating solutions to people and educating them of not what the solution was, but why is this the solution? And then you just let them decide. I would say, this is the solution. This is how much the investment's going to be. And we would go down the list and I would prioritize it, from most important to least important.
Mhm.
And then I would just let them decide.
Yeah.
You know, uh, you let me know what you would like to do for you and your air conditioning system, and I'll be happy to take care of it. I didn't tell them they needed anything.
Right.
I didn't sell them anything. I educated them, identified the problem, offered them a list of solutions, and let them make the best decision for them and their family.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, and
But
that's
that's all communication.
it is, and it's also, it then goes on to the last law 6, which is so
Law 6
complimentary. It,
is knowledge.
yeah.
And when every time I present these 6 laws, once I get done, I tell people it's actually 5 plus infinity, because the sixth law is infinite.
Yeah.
It's the never ending law, and it applies to all the 5 in front. So
Mm,
when most people hear knowledge, they think that they need to know their product better, or how to use their tools better, how to diagnose better,
mhm.
and that is true.
Sure.
You need to master your craft and master your skill.
Yeah.
But what I like to look at is, what do you know and what are you learning about the 5 previous laws?
Hmm. Yeah.
And how are you doing that effectively every day?
Yeah.
Because, by the way, these 6 laws are not a 9 to 5.
Mm.
This is
Wow. Wait,
I had
they're not a 9 to 5. I just
that's what
slowly
I'm a
roll.
business owner. I can do what I
Yeah.
want,
I want to go on
you know?
vacation on Monday through Friday.
Yeah. And you should. And an amazing thing about that comment, Joe,
Yeah.
is when I would go on vacation, my team would threaten me if I called them when I was on vacation.
Mm.
They didn't want to hear from me.
Yeah.
They didn't want to bother me. I knew that they had it taken care of.
Yeah.
And they would tell me, "Don't you dare call on vacation." And they were serious now.
Yeah.
They didn't want me worrying about it. They wanted me to trust them. That's what they were asking for, is they wanted me to trust them.
Mm.
And you know what? Every time I went on vacation, I came back, the building was still standing.
How about that?
It
How
it was
about that?
incredible.
Yeah.
It's
They probably
ridiculous.
they
I don't
probably made
know.
more money without you there.
They probably did. I Hey, when I would go on site, I would just basically build rapport with the homeowners, and I dressed exactly the same as my team did. I
Mm,
didn't have different color shirts. I didn't have a name tag that said manager or owner or boss or none of that garbage.
mhm.
I was there to perform on a level like everybody else. But when I would build that relationship, I would always joke with the owners. I said, if I stick around too long, I'm just going to slow them down,
Yeah.
because they were better at their job than I was.
Right.
And back to teamwork. Like, I hired people that had strengths and my weaknesses, and
Mhm.
we worked together and complemented one another. And I would slow them down.
Yeah.
But the 6th law, that the infinite law,
Mhm.
the one thing that we did in our company was we brought this stuff up every week. Every single week, we would spend 60 minutes. The entire company was there. Couldn't book sales calls over it. It was mandatory. And yes, since it's mandatory, regardless or not, I paid them to be there.
Mm,
And we spent 60 minutes together. And we learned ways to be better in the market. We learned ways to create better experiences. We learned ways of how to become better at these laws, at these 6 laws. And then we would go out and execute. And we would go out and execute. And we would do it as a team.
mm.
And man, the energy was so high in those 60 minutes, because that they would come together and they would feed off of one another, and it was amazing. But we never quit law 6, because that's kind of the secret, is we always learned from our mistakes. We always learn from each other's mistakes,
Mm.
and we learned of better ways to impact the market.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, man, that's the way that you're breaking this down, friends. This is also something that the consumers can can absolutely apply to their world. I mean, the
Yes,
communication
please.
part, it's like the attitude. Are you treating this person with some level of dignity, or are you
Mhm.
calling them demanding that they get to your house and you take, right? Like, or are you saying, "Hi, how are you? Like, how's your day going?"
Mhm.
I went to a service place today, and um, the question of "How's your day going?" was the only reason that stressed out employee took care of me. I know it.
That's
I
right.
wasn't trying to butter them up. I'm curious. I ask questions. I've said this before in this space. My mom taught me to always ask how somebody's day's going because
Yeah.
it shows that you care.
Uh, when we look at these principles and all the things that we're talking about, and when we go back to the question that I ask every one of my business clients now is, what experience are you creating?
Mhm,
That question to the consumer that I'll ask now is very similar. What experience are you creating as a consumer?
mhm.
What is it that you're doing to be the best client that that company has had today?
Mm. How can they do that? How can consumers do that, Josh? Like
Well, so
practically.
I've created 6 laws, and if
Mhm.
you wanna go through them, no.
Is the acronym like
Yeah,
attack? I don't know.
it's
I'm guessing here. I'm
it is.
figuring it
If
out.
I'm glad you brought that up because if you write out the 6 laws, the acronym does spell attack, and it is a byproduct of developing these and how we develop these laws and how they come into play. It was a byproduct, but it's also so fitting
Mhm,
because like I said earlier, and as everybody knows now, I'm a tradesman. I've been a tradesman my whole life. There's nothing soft and glorious about being in the trades.
yeah.
It's rough, it's calloused, it's hard, sweaty, bruised, bloody work.
Mhm.
I love it. I mean, I love it. So the attack acronym, the fact that it's not this little hugging,
Mhm,
soft, kind word appeals to me more because that's what you have to do. You want to ask me what you got to do in the marketplace? I'm going to tell you, you got to get up every single day and you have to go out there and you have to attack it. You have
mhm,
to attack your attitude, the way you treat your team, what you're doing to the clients in the marketplace, and what value are you adding?
mhm,
Plain and simple. You've got to get off your ass and you've got to go out there every day and you have to attack it and you have to attack the feelings of wanting to be lazy, wanting to quit and focusing on your competition and worrying if somebody's doing something different. I don't care about that. What I care about is you going out there and being the best version of yourself. And you want to do it, you attack it every single day. Plain
mhm.
and simple.
Yep. And that's where there's effective leadership. Like
Mhm.
that's where it's not just a grind anymore. You're actually being very strategic and very sharp. And that's where you're creating the opportunity to have a different
Yeah,
experience, man.
that's
Yeah.
right. Well, if a hammer is the only tool in your toolbox, then every problem is a nail.
Amen to that, brother.
And there's a lot of business people and a lot of tradesmen that only carry a hammer.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Josh, like, what would you have to say, like, as we wrap this time up, man? Like,
Mhm.
one, how can we connect with you? Where can people find you? Because, guys, as
Okay.
you can tell, Josh, if you know somebody in the trades, if you own a business in the trades, if you like a trades company, a company that you feel like
Mhm.
they just do good work, one of the blessings that you can be to them is connecting them with a resource like Josh. It really is. Like,
I would
that's a
love
compliment.
the opportunity.
Yeah.
It would be a huge compliment and a privilege. I hope people understand how passionate I am about this and how passionate I am about raising that standard, getting rid of that stigma, and
Mm,
creating that experience. So as far as getting with me, uh, I've got the website, which is thetradesmanexperience.com. Gives a good breakdown of my coaching business, the podcast, and bios and information about me and the things that we do. And as Joe said earlier, do me a favor, check out the podcast, The Tradesman Experience, on any platform, and do me a huge favor, leave a review,
mhm.
send me a message, send me an email. Joe, the email is the tradesmanexperience@gmail.com. I would love to connect with people, get their feedback, answer their questions, and selfishly, I'm going to get to learn something. So
And honestly, man, that's why it's such a gift to even hear from you and to learn from you and to actually see your heart behind all this, because it does require a humility and a transparency that is a gift. And that's why, I've been so grateful for what you've brought to the table. The conversations that Josh is having with his co-host Nate are honest conversations, and they're sincere conversations, and you'll hear it in their dialogue. It's so beautifully, we were talking about it earlier, complementary of equipping and being real.
Mhm.
And that
there is a high level of authenticity there
yes.
that I'm not willing to sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe, again, just to kind of let you know that this is a tremendous privilege
Well,
for you to introduce me to your listeners and your followers. That's a great compliment, and I really appreciate that.
oh man, the feeling's mutual, man. I really appreciate you. Seriously, friends, reach out to Josh, follow his podcast. You will enjoy it, dude. I really appreciate all that you're doing, man.
Yeah.
If there's anything that we can do, if there's more conversations, I hope that this is going to be something we just build on for future conversations. Because as you said, there's so much more that can be brought to light with communication, with teamwork. There's every one of these is a podcast. They're all a book, frankly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is, and we can dive deep into them and share more examples and some of the resources that I have and used, to create the businesses and to create these. So, I'm on a mission to create a new standard, and I'm going to do that by connecting with people and sharing with them my experiences and learning from them, and applying all of that every day to see what we can do to become better.
Yeah, dude, I love how your 3 pillars on your website: work,
Work,
build, and
build,
inspire.
inspire.
Hey,
That's my
friends,
mission.
join the mission. It is truly worth it. Josh, thank you so much for being here, my friend. Guys, go to his
Yes, Joe,
website,
thank you.
check him out. You will be blessed by it, and I promise you'll be more profitable, and you'll have a better experience if you're the consumer or the client, whatever you want to be. You will
That's right.
win, and I promise you, it's because of guys like Josh being willing to be the voice and be the expert and really be of service. So, thank you, man. Really appreciate you.
All right. Thank you, sir.